Okay, I have everything here set up for part 3. I have refilled, by this point, my burette with additional sodium hydroxide, and in the flask underneath the burette now I have the sulfuric acid solution. And the idea behind part 3 is to use the concentration that you got from part 2 for the sodium hydroxide to determine the concentration of the sulfuric acid solution. It's going to be the same setup as what I did for part 2. So I have here the sample that I used for part 2. It still has the stir bar in it. Now I need the stir bar for part 3. So to use the magic wand here, I'm just going to place it like so, and you'll see it magnetizes the bar to it and just pulls it straight out. Okay. Now I'm going to very quickly wash the stir bar off to make sure I don't have any residual KHP on it before I use it. So I'm cleaning that right now, and we should be ready to go. So I'm going to do the same thing, tilt it. Okay. And just like before, I'm just going to slowly open the stopcock and allow the burette to dispense sodium hydroxide until we've reached the end point and get a light color change, just like for part 2. You see my color change. Every time a drop hits the surface of the solution, I can see a brief color change. It disappears pretty quickly, but so I know I'm getting close to my end point here. So let me cut the okay. Now you may have seen I got the color change that was pretty intense for a second, but it's still dissipated really quickly, so I'm still not quite there yet. But I know I only want a drop or two. Not quite. Close, but not quite. Okay. And there we go. So that's my endpoint for part 3. And like I said, the process is essentially exactly the same as what you did for part 2. So I'm going to remove this and prepare to start my demonstration for the last part. Okay, I've got my setup ready for part 4, the last part of this lab. Now I've got, again, I've refilled my burette with my sodium hydroxide. In the flask I have sodium oxalate dihydrate and distilled water as well as indicator, just like in parts 2 and 3. So the process is going to be exactly the same. I've got my stir bar in there rotating. I slowed it down a little bit because the stir bar was kind of going too fast and it was obscuring my ability to see a color change, so I decided to cut back on the rotation speed just a little bit. But anyway, with that I'm going to do the same as for parts 2 and 3. I'm going to go ahead and open my stopcock and just carefully watch to see when my color change starts to appear. I'm starting to see a faint color change every time the drop hits the surface of the solution, so I've cut back the flow from the burette to just a drip, and I know that I'm getting fairly close to reaching my endpoint. Okay, so we've reached the end point. Again, you see the color change. Actually looks like I overshot this by about 1 drop. Probably should have cut it off 1 drop sooner than I did. So let me go ahead and make sure I don't lose any sample. And that's that. So again, for each part, I did 1 trial. If you were in the lab, you would do 3, and for each part, you average the calculations for your trials. You should be provided with data sheets featuring volumes, so that you do not obviously need to read the burette yourself. You'll be given the volumes, and you'll need to use those volumes to make your calculations.